In the 17th century, Brazil became a significant theater of conflict as European powers competed for control over valuable colonies. The Dutch-Portuguese War, 1601–1661, saw the Dutch West India Company attempt to seize territories in Portuguese Brazil to tap into the region's lucrative sugar production and trade networks. As the conflict escalated, it resulted in the capture of various Dutch and even British prisoners who found themselves caught up in the colonial strife. The Dutch initially gained some ground in Brazil, especially in the northeastern regions like Pernambuco, where they captured the capital, Recife, in 1630. Over the next few decades, the Dutch consolidated their hold on parts of Brazil, establishing the colony of Dutch Brazil, or New Holland. They aimed to break the Portuguese monopoly on sugar and create a profitable settlement for the Dutch Republic. However, the Portuguese launched a series of counteroffensives to reclaim their territory, leading to intense battles and sieges. During these military confrontations, soldiers and sailors from the Dutch forces often found themselves captured by Portuguese troops. Additionally, many British mercenaries and sailors who were employed by the Dutch or had joined the conflict for various reasons were also taken prisoner. Once captured, these individuals faced harsh treatment and deplorable conditions. The fate of Dutch and British prisoners in Brazil during this time was grim. Captured soldiers and sailors were often subjected to forced labor, used by the Portuguese as a means to exploit their skills and physical endurance. Many were sent to work on the sugar plantations, where they were put to grueling tasks under the scorching sun. This type of labor was already harsh for the enslaved African workforce, and prisoners of war fared no better. They were often treated with brutality, poorly fed, and kept in squalid living conditions. Aside from working on plantations, some prisoners were also forced to perform manual labor related to military infrastructure. They were tasked with building or repairing fortifications, cutting wood, and other labor-intensive activities that were essential to maintaining Portuguese defenses against Dutch attacks. The arduous work, combined with the tropical climate, malnutrition, and diseases like malaria, led to high mortality rates among the prisoners. The Portuguese authorities were not above using the prisoners as tools in psychological warfare either. It was not uncommon for Dutch or British captives to be paraded in front of local populations or their own captured comrades as a show of dominance. The Portuguese hoped to demoralize the Dutch forces and deter further assaults by making an example of those who fell into their hands. Escaping from captivity was nearly impossible, as prisoners were closely guarded and the surrounding terrain was unfamiliar and hazardous. The tropical forests, swamps, and vast distances between settlements made any attempt at escape a desperate gamble with survival. Even if prisoners managed to flee, they faced the threat of capture by indigenous tribes who were sometimes allied with the Portuguese, or even by hostile wildlife in the dense jungles. Negotiations for prisoner exchanges occasionally occurred, but they were rare and often prolonged, as the Portuguese used captured Dutch and British soldiers as bargaining chips to gain leverage in the ongoing conflict. Prisoners who were lucky enough to be exchanged often returned to their compatriots in a weakened state due to the harsh conditions they had endured. Others, however, were not as fortunate and succumbed to the brutal combination of forced labor, disease, and mistreatment. For those prisoners who survived long enough to be released or escape, their accounts painted a picture of a bleak and unforgiving experience. Many spoke of the inhumane conditions and the sheer struggle for survival while being forced into hard labor. The plight of these prisoners highlighted the broader human cost of the colonial wars in Brazil, where the struggle for economic and territorial supremacy came at the expense of countless lives. The legacy of these captives remained largely uncelebrated in history, overshadowed by the grand narratives of colonial conquests and the eventual decline of Dutch power in Brazil. In 1654, the Portuguese successfully ousted the Dutch from their Brazilian territories, bringing an end to the period of Dutch colonization. However, the memories of the hardships endured by those who were taken prisoner during the conflicts left a lasting, albeit quiet, testament to the grim realities of colonial warfare in the Americas. Ultimately, the experience of Dutch and British prisoners in 17th-century Brazil reflects the harsh nature of colonial conflicts, where captives were subjected to conditions not far removed from slavery. Their stories serve as a reminder of the broader human consequences of the European colonial rivalries that shaped the history of the Americas.